Okay. Okay, one of the things you want to do, we were talking about earlier, you want to be able to get a good crisp picture. You want to avoid motion blur. The way we avoid motion blur is using a higher shutter speed. So a shutter speed of 1,000 is going to give you a good stop clip. Um, Too slow, yeah, your target's not moving, you're flying, you're going to get a little blur. So by using a higher shutter speed of 1,000, you will get both, like stopping both, and you'll get a good crisp picture. Depth of field, that's pretty much going to be set for your camera. Um, at the distance you're taking a picture, your depth of field won't come into play too much. You'll be far enough away from wherever you're taking that your depth of field will cover pretty much everything in your picture. And of course, focus. When you get ready to focus on most cameras now, you hold the shutter button halfway down, and that will focus your picture. As you're coming up to your target, you want to start focusing. Um, Even if you're not really on your target, but your target is in the same level plane as where your picture, where you're pointing. Like if you're on the highway and you want the bridge, but you're on the highway leading the bridge, you can focus on the highway, and that will get your camera really close to where the focus is. And then when you get to your target and you start focusing again, your camera will pick it up a lot faster if you kind of pre-focused and got close to your subject.
John, can I make a comment here?
Sure.
Back up one slide, please. Okay, back at the beginning of the course, just to ground everybody, is I mentioned that this would not be an academia type course. This is going to be more of a practical applications course, is how it's being taught. So with that, a comment I'll make is be aware, we are not going to be trying to make you or make you into professional photographers. Our objective here is basically equip you so you can do the mission successfully. So here is one of the points that I just want to bring out is like if you notice when we're talking about the camera, here are three things that you must worry about: motion blur, depth of field, focus. Now, we bring this out to make you aware because when you look at your photos, and again, we'll talk about verification. We want you to be aware of these are the probable things you're going to run in, you may see, and you need to recognize that that's not good. Because motion blur is kind of easy, okay? If you want to see what brand bike he's riding, you can't do that. Now, there is a whole school of thought on how to go to mitigate these things, but what we're doing here is, again, since we're not trying to make you a digital photographer, a professional digital photographer, remember those settings we recommended back on the camera? Okay, and remember we talked about the sports scene mode and the ISO and the shutter speed settings? Okay. Also, John mentioned in one of the other slides is the camera, if it has autofocus, there's a couple of switches you need to make sure on. What we're up to is if you follow the items that we have identified in the checklist and make sure they're right, those settings that we're recommending are designed to mitigate the features, some of the features you see here. And you'll see there's other things coming along. But instead of being a professional photographer type approach and needing to know all the different ways to kind of correct these, what we've kind of done is if you follow the recommended settings, you should not experience these. Now, will that do that 100% of the time? The answer is no. For example, the presumption is if I'm flying in an aircraft, I think it's probably going to be a sunny day, and it's probably going to be kind of clear skies, but you all know that that may not be the point. You know, we may be flying in an overcast situation. So, but the majority of the time, the settings that are recommended in the cue card, if you do it, it will mitigate these problems that you're seeing. You need to know what the problems are, though, because if it turns out you see them, you know that you're going to have to do something else. And again, how you handle it is there's a number of options to do that, but it also depends upon your equipment that you're using. So what I just want to kind of verify is when John's going to go through these items here, we want you to make sure you understand that they can exist. And also for your particular equipment, if they occur, how would you handle these items? Again, focus, for example, well, if the auto, first of all, if the autofocus is off, well, guess what? That's where the problem's at. Flip it on. If the autofocus is on and the picture is still out of focus, it's probably because the camera is focusing on another item. The autofocus is getting fooled and it's not necessarily looking at what you want to something. Now, there are a number of ways, depending upon your equipment, to fix that. So you'll need to get educated with your particular camera equipment that you're using. But most of the time, though, with the autofocus, it's a matter of, okay, do you have your target properly centered, and the camera will lock in. So just be aware. These are situations we show them to you so you can be aware they exist, and we really don't want them, and because it doesn't deliver the product. But if you use the recommended settings that are in the cue cards, 9 times out of 10, you shouldn't have a problem with the picture. Okay. So, John, I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective, is that, we share these, but we want to, they need to be ready for them, and depend on their equipment, they just know how they need to make an adjustment for it.
Okay.
Okay.
We want to do this one, Rick?
Yeah, we kind of covered it already.
Yeah.
But I just make an additional comment, or Mark is welcome to comment. But again, these are the things we mentioned on the items in the front, just so you know, okay, if you have those problems, what do you got to do to fix them? Tell you what, back up one slide. Okay. Again, without trying to get too detailed, motion blur just means you're not stop actioning the picture down fast enough. Translation, you need a faster shutter speed. So if you need to look at the camera, if it's still giving it, you're going to probably have to bump the shutter speed up or increase the ISO speed so the camera can react differently. So just be aware. Motion blur is usually affected by shutter speed and film speed, or ISO. And those are the things you'll play with that. Depth of field, for those of you that are not familiar with the cameras, and this is where we do the in-person class, we get into more of the touchy-feely. But the cameras are designed to react to light. Again, if you go from a dark room to a bright sunny day, the amount of light the camera is getting changes, and the camera has to adapt to that. Your lens the term is stops down. Basically, there's an aperture that opens and closes in the lens to allow more or less light to go into the camera. Well, what happens is the depth of field is when you get into a low light situation, or the lens starts what's called opening up or stopping down, the phenomena happens, which is called depth of field, where only a specific item in the picture, in the depth of the picture, is in focus, and everything else is blurred. So for example, in the example that you see here, the gnome in the front is blurred where the gnome towards the middle is in focus. This picture has what's called a narrow depth of field. And the simplest way to fix it, again, this is just an example, would be you'd want to stop your lens down or restrict the lens light, which means, guess what? You got to up the shutter speed, or you have to increase the film speed sensitivity so that everything in the photo is done. Focus, I mentioned that one already in the example, is most of these cameras, you actually can control what the camera looks at for its focusing from a particular point to a field, or what's called a weighted view, to full frame. And in this particular picture, if you notice, the weeds up in the front are in focus where the guy is not in the back. So this could be either an example of a depth of field problem, or it could be the case that the camera has picked up and locked its focus in on the front weeds, and hence the rest of it kind of gets thrown out. The cameras, of course, they're all different, but they show you, in these sophisticated cameras, they show you what they're focusing on in the viewfinder. You just have to look at it and see. So, John, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so what we're talking about here is, again, those three particular items, that's where these interactions can occur. There's no one to fix those pictures. There's no one thing that usually will fix it. It's usually a combination of those things. Again, this is now moving where you really need to know your equipment and know how to take photos to be able to really fix it. But as I mentioned, the chances of this happening are low if you use the recommended settings we did, because most of the time these new cameras with those recommended settings will deliver the job. So, all right, since this one is a little thing and it's also a heads up, does anybody have any questions? Mark, did you see anything in there that we should hit?
Well, the only other comment that I would make would be motion blur is most of the time for us introduced by the camera, the photographer not holding his steady position in the airplane, and that becomes a real problem on bad weather days. And it's just the reality of airborne photography, and you just have to fight it or take more pictures or go for a faster shutter speed.
Yeah. What we're talking about too is, and also, again, yeah, you're inside a moving platform jiggling. Another thing too is, if you, depending upon where you're seated in the aircraft, and we'll be discussing that later, first of all, you're never going to shoot through plexiglass, number one. We always have a porthole or a window that we're going to be taking our pictures to. So just remember, if you accidentally get the tip of that lens out into the airstream or the slipstream of the aircraft, you're going to have your camera jostling a lot. So there's those kind of things that happen. Most of the time, like I said, if you use the settings, it will work fine, or you're probably doing something and just need to see and reposition how you're doing it. Okay. Anything else, Mark, you think of?
No, you're good.
All right. John, you want to go ahead and take back over?
All right. So pretty much covered everything there. It's another one, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here, I can just make a couple of comments. I forgot we had this slide here. I could have made a comment here too. Some other things on the camera, just remember, and it all has to do with your camera and the type of camera, especially when you're trying to shoot pictures for a movie. Be aware you may have shutter delay in your camera. And while this is I push the button and then the camera takes the picture. It can be short, and of course, the higher quality the camera, the faster it is. But just be aware when you're framing your pictures, you're going to need to make compensations for that. Again, if you're using high quality, the cameras that are recommended, you're not going to have a problem. Let's see. We don't need to worry about that one. Image resolution quality we've covered. I'll mention this last point, but again, it's highly specific to the camera. There are some features, some display features in the camera. One of them that, out of all the stuff, one of them that is kind of helpful is what's called a histogram. And when you look at that, it will show you the exposure of the picture. If you want to learn how to use it, but you do need to understand the histogram, and basically it's a bell curve. You'd like to have a nice even bell curve when you take your picture. It's an indicator of how good the exposure was. However, my suggestion is don't worry about these additional displays, except for things like the GPS one that we're checking. Just stay with the basic use of the camera and look at the picture. I mean, 99% of the time you can look at the picture in the viewfinder and in the display of the camera and verify your picture is good, rather than moving into these more, what I call more higher end features. Okay, John, that really kind of finished preliminary. Next, then you're going to be moving into actual the framing and taking part. So I think that's the last of the comments I need to make.
Yeah, those two. All right. So we want to pause here. Anybody questions? We good? Rick, you want to take a break?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and take, because it's 9:45. How much time you want to do? About a 10-minute break?
Works for me.
Okay, let me, folks, up to this point, this has kind of been laying the groundwork for getting things done. And if you remember back on that flow chart, this is kind of all of leading in. It's been all the preparatory stuff, and now what we're moving into is the actual let's go do this thing. So in the do part, we're going to be covering what you need to do on the AP sorting, how to take the pictures. We'll be talking about flight patterns that you need to do, things that you do to make sure you get the shots that are needed. So all those kind of will be in there. And then more importantly, where we'll be spending a lot of time will be on looking at the shots. And again, as expected, when you take a picture, there's a whole number of things that can go wrong with it. And you need to be aware of what items to look at in this picture and make sure. So for example, if I'm taking a picture of a radio tower, I'd like to have the picture of the radio tower as opposed to having the radio tower with the entire left wing of the aircraft in it. So we're going to be going through how to basically do those kind of things, look at some things that are good, bad. Also, we'll be talking about the sorting and what you as an AP need to expect to be given in a briefing, for example, and because that's going to educate you on both what's needed for the mission and, more importantly, what's needed for the customer. So we'll be kind of moving through all those items. So let's go ahead. It is we're at 9, basically, it's 9:47, basically quarter till. Why don't we go ahead and do 10 minutes, okay? Or do we want to do 15? Mark, John, what do you recommend?
I'm good with 10.
Okay. Everybody, let's do a 10-minute break. That'll give everybody a chance to get a snack, coffee, use facilities if you need to. We'll keep the meeting open. And so we will start back up at 9:55. John, I'm going to go ahead and kill the share temporarily.
Okay.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah.
I'll be back in just a minute.
Okay.
Hey, John and Mark. From a timing standpoint, because we're using we're restricting the questions through the chat, we are running a little ahead of schedule, so there's not going to be any need to rush right now. And
Good.
yes, it's just, again, this is the first time we've done, oh, hold on, I got 2 people bounced out. I need to bounce them back in.
All right. There hasn't been a lot of questions, but I've been keeping up with them.
Yeah, and like I said, the chat's doing a good job. So I think we'll still stay to the game plan, which is run through the stop point for today. And if we finish a little early, we can, but we can actually just do some more random questions, like an open question session at the end. But I don't think I want to get into starting the photo processing piece.
No, but what you might do is see what experiences people have had and problems that they have had when taking pictures, and then toss in, what I love to do is talk about personal experiences, different scenarios that you've been into and how you dealt with it.
Yeah.
Kind of think out of the box.
Yeah, because yeah, and a couple of little things too, like what do you do if you're in the right seat of the aircraft?
Yeah, you got to open the window and lock it open, as opposed to having it bang back and forth on you.
And or make sure you got a screwdriver on your key ring.
Yeah, right.
Better do that before you leave.
Yeah, and don't lose that screw.
Tell you what, I'll get the kit out, because if somebody needs something explained too, I've got the big kit here. So let me go grab it real quick.
We also, I don't know if you've got it in there later, the difference between oblique and nadir photography.
Say that again.
The difference between oblique and nadir, shooting at an angle or shooting straight down.
Oh yeah, yep.
Not that yet.
Which with our new D7500s, we actually had that problem solved.
How's that?
The 7500s have the tilt out screen.
Yeah, right.
So literally, you could do a vertical shot downward, as long as you remember the cardinal rule of put the blasted neck strap on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that needs to be always on anyway.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that at some point.
All right, let me get the kits. I'll pull the kits in here.
Hey, Mark, did we ever resolve the issue of the north arrow discrepancy with the Solmeta units?
Not to my knowledge. That's why shooting target cards is so important. I played with the Solmeta where not only the direction was off, but the location itself was off. Not by so much that it matters that much, but the facing seems to be the real issue, and I never got an answer from Solmeta.
So we're still recommended to go ahead and put in a manual entry into the processing for the north arrow orientation?
Well, if you shoot the north card and then you go and bring it into RoboGeo, and depending on what it shows, yeah, then you either correct it in RoboGeo or leave it correct. The problem is if you're working for FEMA, we're not going to be able to use RoboGeo to fix it, and you just have to take what it gives you.
Well, you can still, even if we're shooting for FEMA, we can still fix things. There's a very fast fix routine that we cover in the processing piece. But it puts a step in, because with FEMA, we could go straight to the database, okay, which is the ideal goal. But if you have to, you can make a quick sidetrack in RoboGeo, and you can literally blast everything in there if you follow certain rules.
Yeah, because you got to avoid all the other stamping stuff.
Well, no, the key rule is you must fly the sequence. Okay. If you are religious about flying the sequence, you can literally take RoboGeo and do a photo blast. and everything's corrected in one shot. But and when we go through the processing, Mark, I cover that as a high recommendation on how to handle the north-facing error problem. The good news is FEMA doesn't need north-facing error.
Yeah, right. But they probably want, if in the exit data, they probably want it to be right if it's there at all.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
what circumstances, though, 1 out of 1,000 or so, would you not be able to fly the recommended sequence?
Usually, I can think of only a few, Ken, but you know where what is more normal is you fly the recommended settings, and then you need some additional shots. Again, remember to tell the story properly. But very seldom, I don't think I've ever been on a sortie that we couldn't fly the recommended pattern.
Me either.
Well, just remember, if you're shooting out of the left rear, you're circling the target counterclockwise. If you're shooting out of the right front, you're shooting the targets clockwise.
Right. Now, when I go on an actual photo mission, I don't ever want to sit in the right seat in front. I want to sit in the back so the pilot and I see the same thing, so I can tell him exactly what I want and he can see what I want. Whereas if you sit in the right seat, you're flying blind.
Well, and the strut's more of a problem in the right seat than the back.
Oh, yeah.
Now, everything's more of a problem in the front seat than the back. So, okay. All right, everybody. We're being a little more lean because I did an assessment of our time schedule, and with the chat managing the questions, we actually are running a little ahead because we build a lot more into for the questions. Hang on, I got some people have exited and they're coming back in. So, okay, so what we got, the game plan we were talking about, if you didn't hear our conversation between the instructors, is we're going to go ahead and move on through this section. We'll probably have some extended sessions, and we can also talk about some, again, since this is all the flying and how to do the mission, we have a lot of, not horror stories, but some learned experience things that, if you like, we'll share. And but the target will be is we'll if we do shorten up on the time, I do not want to start the photo processing because once we start that, that is an entire piece we need to continue through. So what we'll game plan to do is go through. Basically, we're going to go through now all of the things to execute the sortie up in the air and get what's needed. And then handle things. And then if we're short of the 12 o'clock, we'll be short of the 12 o'clock. And then tomorrow, of course, we'll engage at 1300 CDT and take you through the other two pieces, which is the the photo process piece and the delivery. And like I said, if you all pay attention real good to this part and execute this part, 100% correct every time, you can actually almost even in some cases, you'll be able to skip the entire photo processing piece. The other thing I might mention too, if you can see my video frame, if we do get later on, I did bring the kits in here with all the stuff. So if we want to look at any specific thing, we'll be able to do that. I mentioned earlier, somebody asked about the kits. And Mark, I think, answered back. National used to provide these things. However, be aware, National does not provide the camera kits anymore. And we just bought.
Really? That's terrible.
I agree. Louisiana Wing we bought 2 new kits to retire out because we're retiring out our older equipment because some of our older equipment, for example, in Hurricane Harvey, we needed to do almost continuous shooting, which means stick the camera out the plane, set the shutter for automatic shutter, and snap a picture every, I can't remember, was 6 seconds, Mark, or 10 seconds we took pictures?
Every 1 second.
Okay. some of the older equipment, such as the Nikon D90 series, did not have that feature. So the ones we just bought, just for everybody's information, the full kits we just bought for Louisiana Wing, which includes Pelican case. We went to the D7500. We stayed Nikon. D7500 with the zoom lens, battery packs, backup GPS systems, spare memory cards, everything in a Pelican case, because that's how we like to protect these things. We turnkeyed those two kits at $1,900 a piece. Now, be aware, I also have some connections through the photo distributing centers. But I do want to warn you too, though, if your wing does decide to buy these, watch out for gray market cameras. These are cameras that are not in such Nikons, Canons, it doesn't matter brand. They're not intended for the U.S. markets. And some of these camera houses will import these not for U.S. market cameras. And where they may, the problem is with them, some of them have some, it's not the official software in the chips. So there's all kinds of problems with that. The biggest problem, though, is if you buy a gray market camera, it will not have a U.S. warranty. If it doesn't have a U.S. warranty, guess what? If you need it serviced, you have to send it back to wherever it came from, as opposed to handling it with that. So, for example, the Nikons that we just bought, these are through Nikon USA, so they have Nikon USA warranties. The other thing too is they're also a 3-year warranty as opposed to 90 days. So just be aware. But if your wings need equipment, they're probably talking about that. It is good to get rid of to try to get up to the newer cameras, because, like I said, the things, missions like Hurricane Harvey in Texas are probably going to not be that's probably not going to be a one-time event. So the idea of having to do sequencing pictures is probably, it's probably going to happen. And so these basically a Nikon 7100 or above has that. There's also some other nice features in some of these newer cameras that just make your life a little bit easier. So, all right, John.
All right.
All right. So what we're going to do is now you've kind of seen all the preliminary stuff. You've seen, your role. You've seen things that you ought to build in your kit. And by the way, tell you what, John, just let me kill your share for just a second. Hold on, go back. If you can look in my view window, by the way, we talked about an AP toolkit. Whoops, there we go. All those things you saw in a toolkit, I keep in a little ammo box like this. So when I head to the aircraft, all those items for target cards, everything else you need is just in there. Spare batteries and things are in that. So it's a real nice little handy. I just grab that and go. And of course I grab the camera kit, but now the camera kit, the big Pelican case, I'm not taking that in the aircraft. I need to be able to, move around. So these are just some things that you can do. So we kind of covered all those things, covered the equipment. We've now made you pseudo professional photographers in that if you do the right things, it's going to do the right picture for you. Now, though, is probably, if you're not going to find the next section on the cue card, actually we'll show it to you, but on the cue card, the let's go do the sortie picture is really only 3 lines on the cue card. So this next information we'll be covering is how are we going to go execute, how you're going to take the pictures, and more importantly, how you need to make sure the pictures are good before you leave the target. So that'll be it, and then we'll finish up with questions for today, and that'll do it for today. So John, I'll let you go ahead and take back over.
All right. All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to finish up here. We'll go through the next section, or composition and framing the image. Okay. So your challenges that you're going to have to accomplish is you want to center your target. Your target should be the center of your photo. You want to eliminate plane parts. You want level horizon, and you want to fill the frame. If you accomplish all four of those, you'll wind up with a good photo that the customer was asking for and deliver what they wanted.
Hey, John, back up for 1 second.
There or the next one?
The one that had the 3 pictures. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just a real quick. As we move through this section, by the way, remember everything we're going to be talking about is going to be in the context of what you were asked to do. So what is in the sortie tasking. So just be aware when you look at these things, take them for what we're trying to do, which is to basically point out the item. So for example, the centering the target photo, it all depends upon what the target is. So for example, if the target is the warehouse, that first big warehouse in the right, then yeah, we're off target. If the target is that road in the center by that intersection, okay, well, it was still a little off target, but just be aware. Now, the other one is like at the bottom too, the fill of the frame. If the target is the water tower, obviously you're too far away. But if the target is that field, because maybe that was a debris field, then it may be fine. So just be aware, you're going to need to put these, when you look at these things, and we're going to start talking about them, is just keep in context, but you're really going to need to pay attention to what your sortie tasking is, because the picture could be good or bad just because of the tasking. The plane part picture is kind of obvious. We don't want plane parts in the thing. So, all right, John, I just wanted to hit that real quick.
All right. So we're setting up the shot. So when you get ready to take your photos, you approaching your target, first thing you'll do is make a target ID pass. You're going to find your target, identify your target. Sometimes we'll fly directly over the target and catch that GPS location on the camera. You can take a picture of the G1000 if that's available for you. But you want, and then, okay, so you've ID'd your target. So then the pilot's going to set up for your north shot. And that's north shot for you, the camera, not the plane going north. The camera, when I talk about the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, west, that's the camera view. The camera's facing north, camera's facing east. And then the plane, depending on if you're sitting in the back or the right seat, will be the one off. The recommended is you want to be about 1,000 feet in altitude and about 1,000 feet from your target, 1,000. That's going to give you the proper angle for your target, for your picture, and it'll set up everything. It'll set up looking out the camera, looking out the plane. It'll help you avoid plane parts, and it'll help you from trying to stay on your head to get the right angle and the right picture and everything else. And then we're going to fly the pattern. So the 4 square pattern, I'll show you a little bit later, is preferred over the circle. And we'll discuss that a little bit more. You're going to fly the cardinal points. Take multiple shots for each direction. You take one picture, and yeah, it may look good in that small screen on the back of the camera. You put it on the computer and you realize, yeah, it's not really focused. The focus was off. Didn't catch right. Camera didn't catch it. So take multiple pictures. You don't want to take too many pictures because all those pictures have to be gone through in processing. If you have 25 pictures of facing north, somebody has to go through those 25 and pick out the one or two that is the best picture. You know, you want more than one, but again, you don't want too many. It's just, it clutters everything up. It takes more time.
Yeah, John,
Also,
let me throw a disclaimer in real quick here. Before, because again, with the, remember at the beginning of the thing, I told you all, we're going to present you a recommended method. And the reason I wanted to come back here and hit this is this slide here begins what is a sore spot. Remember I stressed earlier, I said, you got a job to do, but I also stressed that you and your air crew need to work together as a team. This guy, what we're about to talk about, can be a little point of disagreement, let's just say. Pilots may want to do it differently, may want to have a thing. The key thing is, as I mentioned, we're going to give you, what we're about to go through is a recommended. And the recommended coming from the standpoint of, let's try to make sure we get it done right the first time and not have to go back. So that's the whole positioning here. Different, you know, a pilot may want to fly it differently for whatever reasons. There could be, I'm having trouble coming up with reasons, but bottom line, there may be other reasons. As long as you and the pilot and with your mission observer agree to what you're going to do to get the shots, then, you know, work it out, decide, and go with it. But what's going to be here, so people see, especially if we've got some pilots in the group that take this, and we do these same things for, in fact, we're scheduled to do it for the flight clinic coming up, is, you know, we're mainly trying to make sure that everybody knows what we want to do, why we want to accomplish it. It is a preferred method from the standpoint, it's the best shot at getting your shot to pictures the first time. Things such as why run a square pattern rather than a circle pattern? Why run an ID pass? That's probably one. The two most prevalent problems here is no ID pass, and there's good reason for it. And I got my fullest shot, and we're going to boogie to the next target. That ID pass, well, Mark knows quite well the ID pass because I happen to be in an aircraft. Mark happened to be our planning officer who tasked us. Let's just say we ended up over the wrong bridge. So it can happen. And the reason it happened was because an ID pass wasn't executed to verify what the target was. It was caught afterwards, but there's a reason for doing an ID pass. It's basically, and everybody is participating with that. So just take this as, this is a recommended. You could do a different, some type of flight pattern to get your thing. But the key thing is, this is what's recommended. It's the best chance of getting what you need done. And as long as you've had a discussion, your flight crew in briefing has talked about the mission and decided what they want to do and everybody's on board, then go do it. But just remember, this is a recommended. This is not locked in stone, must do, or, you know, or things are not going to happen.
Well,
So John,
another thing to think about is if you make up your own procedures, you may not fly with the same people all the time. And so it's better if there's sort of a standard, and then you get in the plane with people you've never flown with before, you all still know the basic process.
Yeah, and the other thing is not just with the air crew. Again, remember, in big missions, you're likely to have, you may be doing the photos, but you may be handing off to processing teams. If you have a standard process, and of course you're using things we talked about, you're making the life of the processing team easier to make sure they're correct. The more things you change and the more differences that happen, the processing teams can easily get the wrong thing labeled, the wrong shots labeled wrong. So standardization is very key and useful to making sure the whole process works well. And that's the reason I said the recommendation here is, as you see here, is target pass, the square pattern, which you'll see in a second, following a specific sequence. And of course, what's not on this thing, because it's not part of the flight pattern, is the fourth one is, and don't forget to verify the stupid photos before you leave the target. So you'll be hearing that drilled into you probably about 1,000 times before we finish the section. So anyway, just take this as a recommendation. ID pass puts everybody in the aircraft, all eyes are trying to make darn sure you get the right target. The positioning of the aircraft, that 1,000 position, again, is talking about getting the aircraft where you got the framing shots, the least chance of getting parts of the aircraft in the thing. Also, the sequence is a standard sequence. So if you, and the recommendation, like I said, you always start with the north-facing shot, which means if you're in the back seat, the aircraft is flying east to get the north shot. If you happen to be in the observer seat, the aircraft will fly west to get the north shot. And of course, the preferred position for the AP is always in the back seat. And the basic reason for that is that, well, there's actually two. You have less chances of getting plane parts in the shot because further up you buy the strut. So you're better off for the picture in the back. The other thing is by having, and of course, when you're in the back seat, the photo port in the window should always be on the left side. And the reason for that is you, as the AP and the pilot, are seeing the same thing. When you're in the observer seat, you are seeing the target. The pilot may not be able to see the target, otherwise he's got to look across you. So the preferred position, as you'll see in a second, is we'd like the AP to be in the back seat, shooting out a left side porthole. And that way, both you and the pilot are seeing the exact same thing. Okay, but again, take this as not gospel. So if you have a discussion with your pilots, with your air crews, and they want to do something different, take this as the recommended. You now know the reasons, and we'll cover them more, of why we want to do it this way. But if they're adamant about doing it a different way, as long as you get the shots, you can do it. Okay, but we would prefer you to use the preferred method as a standardized way of doing it. Okay, John, sorry about that, but again, this is one of the sticking points that we always need to make sure that everybody is aware that work together. If you work together, you get the job done.
Okay. One thing on the photo sequence there, Rick was saying, you know, with the preferred method and not always possible. I was on a mission where we were taking flights of the airport, and we were attempting to shoot it in the props, but air traffic control overrode us and wouldn't let us fly exactly how we wanted to, where we wanted to, because we were in the proximity of the airport. So stuff like that can come up. You just have to be able to adapt, figure out the next option, and still be able to get the shots from the angles that you need and work it through. So this is the 4-square imaging pattern, suggested way to get the shots. You can see on the, excuse me, the bottom right, where you enter the pattern. You'll be flying, you're on the, well, obviously you're on the right-hand side. Yeah, I'm sorry, right there, shooting from the right window, half a mile from the target, 1,000 feet up. So your first shot will be the north shot. Well, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. That dotted line through the middle, that was your ID pass. So you've flown over the target. You make sure you're on the right target. like Rick was mentioning. You should be able to pass over your target, check your GPS, should be close to what your GPS target was, what they specified in the briefing. You've all seen the same bridge, the same tower, the same building, and then you can start your pass. Everybody knows what they're looking for. I've been on missions where the pilot says, "Oh yeah, there it is. There's what we need to take a picture of," and I'm not finding it. I'm still hunting, and I'm taking the pictures. So everybody needs to make sure and lock on to the target before you start making your passes. So then you're going to enter from the bottom right. You'll make your pass, center up, take your pictures. Now with this graph is set up perfectly square, 4 cardinal points, dead north. That's going to happen, yeah, but I've been on missions where the plane gets bounced around because of turbulence, wind. The pilot doesn't have it dead on for you to set up for dead north. Also, as you're coming up on the target, you may start to focus, and then as you get on your target, you're starting to take pictures. So you're looking a little bit to the front, and then your next picture, then your third picture may be centered on the target. You weren't sure, you're taking a couple more, maybe you took 5 pictures. Well, your GPS is going to show off a little bit because the plane may not be directly facing where you're facing north. Plus, you're turning the camera a little bit, so you're affecting the GPS a little bit too. So bear in mind that your north shot, when you get back at it, may not be 000 or 360, or you may be off a little bit. And Rick, in the second part, will show how you can work around that. But then, as you make your first pass, you do that loop, and you come back and set up for your second pass. You're going towards the top of the screen on that picture. 2 things there. It gives everybody a chance to get set back up for your next pass. At this point, while making that loop, you're recomposing your picture. You're taking a picture of your next cardinal point card. You're doing stuff in the back, and you got to get that up. Gives you a little bit of time for you to get set up for the next picture and be ready. I'll show you the next screen, but if you wind up taking them, well, we'll just go to the next one. How about that? If you're doing a circle like this, you have to set up a lot faster. It's a lot harder on the photographer. Also, you're going to have your eye in the viewfinder a lot more. You don't really get a break there. The way we recommend take the pictures is not looking at the LCD on the back of the screen to take your picture. You want to be looking through the viewfinder, and you can see your target set. I mean, see your target, your picture, your composition, everything's better. But if you're looking through that, and as you're looking down at your target, say you zoomed in a little bit, even you don't even have to zoom in, but if you're looking through that viewfinder, you got a little bounce in the airplane. You're going to have that no matter the calmest day. If you spend too much time looking through that viewfinder, there's a possibility you'll wind up getting airsick. Happened to me one time. I have never been sick flying, and we did these passes, and actually we did passes like this where they were circle. And between looking through the viewfinder and all that, and you're in the viewfinder trying to get your target cards and everything else, yeah, I got a little queasy on it. Wasn't enough to call a knockoff, but it's just not a fun feeling, not comfortable. So flying the square, you got more time to set up. You get your eye out of that viewfinder for a few minutes, and gives you a chance to get better set up. Now, you might have to make a pass like this. Like I said, if that's what you got to do, You know, you just have to adapt to it. I'm not sure there's a spot in here for it, but if you're taking pictures from the right side of the aircraft, sitting next to the pilot, you have to be sure before you leave, on our craft anyway, there's a screw you have to take out of the window so that you can open the window all the way up. That's a big plus to be able to open the window all the way up, because otherwise you're going to have a very small area to try to get your picture out of. So you want to be able to open the window all the way up. You don't want to lose that screw, by the way. And in that side especially, but on the other side too, it's recommended, you sure want to have the neck strap on. That camera can get sucked out of your hands if you go out far enough out the window, and you can do that without even realizing you are. Our camera, if you stick out a little bit, the zoom lens will actually suck out, and if you don't keep your hand on the zoom part of the lens, it'll suck all the way out, and you'll keep getting zoomed out when you don't want to be. So if the camera the wind can do that, for sure. You lean out too far, it can take that camera out of your hands. If you don't have it around your neck, bye-bye camera. It can happen in the back. If I'm in the back or the front, if I'm taking pictures, but I got the neck strap on, it might be harder to lose it out the back window. It's a lot smaller, but I'm sure it's possible. And I don't know if anybody's done it or not. Probably. Everybody's always done something.
Hey, John?
Yes, sir.
Back up to the square slide for a second.
This one?
The square slide, one more.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, everybody, one more thing. Remember, I was stressing work together as a team with your, air crew needs to work together as a team. One other thing that can happen too on the square pattern, there's always, there may be comments about when you're executing the turns. If you notice this diagram, recommended turns are 270s, okay? Is there a reason you can't do a 90-degree turn? And that's what a lot of times, the pilot may want to do. Again, coming from the standpoint of here's the recommended, which has got the best probability. Just be aware, again, this is the reason I bring this up, because this should be a discussion item, is know your pattern, know what you want to run. If the reason for recommending the 270s is that with the 270, there's two advantages. One, the AP has a chance to check the photos after the circuit run that was just run, and can get himself back and reposition and ready for the next leg to come through. At the same time, the second advantage is, one of the key things is you want that aircraft positioned such that it is perpendicular to the target, okay? So with a 270 turn, of course, it's very easy to make sure that the aircraft is lined up properly, and you've got the AP in the back has been able to get ready. Okay? If you run the 90-degree turns, okay, let's keep it to the square pattern, but you run 90-degree turns, it's still not a problem, but here's the catch. The turns will be much sharper, so from the AP standpoint, you're not going to have time when you're coming off, when that 90-degree turn goes, to check the photo. So you're going to have to do all your photo checks after the fourth leg. The other thing too is, you usually got to dog those 90-degree turns. So one, you're going to hang on a little bit. From the pilot standpoint, the most important thing is, coming out of the 90-degree turn, you need to make sure that bird is back. First of all, it's got to get it level. You've got to get the bird back, in line with the leg that you want to run. But you're going to be coming out of a bank turn. And of course, a bank turn means, guess what's lower? The wing on one side of the aircraft versus the other. If it happens to be the side of the aircraft you're shooting out of, you got to make sure the pilot needs to basically hit that turn and bring that aircraft back level to minimize the chance of you getting a piece of the aircraft in that picture. So that's why the recommended is a 270 turn as opposed to a 90 turn. Likewise, if you go, John, go to the circle turn, the circle pattern.
Hold on. There you go.
Okay. The reason this is not the preferred recommended pattern is more of making sure that those two last items I mentioned about the aircraft. One, since you're holding in a bank turn, if you happen to be on the side of the aircraft that has the wing dip, you've got to be more careful that you don't get the wing or the plane parts in your picture. And odds are the plane will be banking the whole time. The second issue too is the one of being parallel to the target. Since the aircraft is always turning, the place at which point you'll be 90 degrees to the target to get your shot is going to be very narrow. So your pictures, we would prefer to have the 90-degree shot to the target. But again, we tell you to take multiple pictures because one may be bad. So they may not always be perfectly aligned, and that may or may not be a problem. It just depends on how close. But the circle pattern, you have those two problems. You have a higher propensity of getting plane parts in, but that depends upon the turn and where you're sitting. And you also have to watch to make sure you don't get too skewed to the target. The square pattern, using 270 turns, just gives you a higher probability of getting it right the first time. So I just wanted to point out, John, that's the reason, two things. It's recommended, but the other thing too is this is where there is sometimes a discussion needs to happen, and it ought to happen back at the briefing with you and the air, with you and your air crew, and just say, okay, let's figure out what are we going to do, and all these will work as long as you all are on the same page. And that's my main message here is, here's a recommended, it's good, but have your discussion and you all just get agreement on the page is what you're going to do and go execute the mission. Okay, John, back to you.
All right. So just a couple things on this one to reiterate. You're flying the cardinal point. This is either pattern. You're making an ID pass. You got to flying slow. You're 1,500 miles. You want your north photo first. Your multiple shots per direction. You might, like we're talking about, you want more than one. You take that one shot and it was the same time the airplane bounced, you're going to have a wingtip or something like that in it. And verify your shots before exiting the target. Make sure you don't have that wingtip or that strut. Right here is a straight down shot. If you're doing a straight down shot, you really need to make sure you've got the neck strap on, because the camera will be all the way out in the window. You have to set up. You're going to want them here. You're probably going to take multiple shots. It's going to be hard to focus, hard to see the screen. You're not going to be able to use the viewfinder, obviously. Our newest cameras have the tilt screen, so if we ever had to do this, we can tilt the screen up and actually see what we're shooting. But if you don't have that option, you'll probably have to take multiple shots. You may have to make multiple passes, because this would be a difficult shot to catch blind, pretty much. You're just hanging the picture out there and shooting.
Yeah, John, the reason this is in here for everybody is, remember there's a recommended pattern and 4 cardinal points, take some multiple shots. But the other thing you heard me stress earlier too is, make sure what your tasking says, and you need to make sure that you take pictures that will meet what the tasking is asking for. Or translation, another way to say this, make sure your pictures tell the story the customer wants. So for example, on this particular one, if it's to get a bird's eye view of the road damage, well, I can, assuming I still fly my 4 cardinal points, obviously I can't use the recommended pattern to get this. So, excuse me. So translation, do the recommended shots that you need per thing. But if you need more shots to get the story properly, then you fly and get those shots. So obviously you can't fly, you can't get this picture from the square pattern or the circle pattern. This is going to require a close fly-in and a down shot. So the message here, though, is take a look at your tasking. And if the 4 cardinal shots or the recommended shots that you're asked to do not answer all the questions, make sure you take extra pictures, do whatever you need to do, position the aircraft to get those extra shots so that your pictures will tell the story for the customer. Okay, that's it, John.
All right. So here, this example here is showing the best optimum is 45 degrees down facing with your camera to your target. And with a half a mile out, 1,000 up, you'll get that. This one's showing 2,000, 2,000. But with that 45 degree down, that's the best angle. It gets you away from most plane parts and sets you up for a good picture.
And just to clarify, again, if you notice from the recommended patterns and that on the earlier slides, you know, this 1,000 by 1,000, or in this particular example, it's 2,000 by 2,000 translation. It's setting up a 45 degree shot angle. Okay. If you look at some of the other slides, they talk about half-mile offset and 1,000 AGL. Well, guess what? If you do the math on that one, what you're going to find is the shot angle is 22.5 degrees, half the 45. So if you stay with these recommendations, either the half mile by, because again, a lot of times they'll fly a half mile offset, half mile by 1,000 AGL or the 1,000 by 1,000, your shot angle, which is the angle that you're taking the picture at, is between 22.5 and 45 degrees. Now, why is that important? Well, above your camera, you got this nifty little thing called the wing. So if you start getting an angle, a shot angle, more than 45, your chances of picking up that wing, depending on where you're sitting in the aircraft, it's higher. If you get a shot angle that's lower than 22.5, so you're starting to approach back to the aircraft, again, depending upon where you're sitting, that crazy wheel and the fuselage can start getting into trouble. So here's one of the recommendations and the reasoning behind it is the best opportunity to get the shots you need and not have extraneous stuff involved in the picture that you need to either get out later, which we don't want to do, is if you keep these recommended settings, the shot angles stay within 22 to 45 degrees, and that's the best chance of not having plane parts show up in your pictures. Okay, and again, you do your verify, you'll see the plane parts, but then you'll have to redo that leg of the shot. So that's the reasoning behind these recommendations, and the logic behind is, here's another example where we're just trying to say is do this, and it'll tend to keep stuff out your way, and your chance of getting the shot right the first time are higher. Okay, John.
All right. So positioning for the shot. The AP has the responsibility of getting the shot. That's your job. That's what you're there to do. You may have to get the mission pilot to fly a little bit different position, out further, in closer, higher, lower, whatever, to get the shot you need. And they may not be aware of that. So you got to communicate with the pilot. Also in that, when you're taking pictures, pilot's going to say, okay, here's your North Pass, and you get ready to start taking pictures. You're taking pictures, and you finish. You need to tell the pilot, okay, I got the pictures, I'm done, so he can start setting up for the next pass. Otherwise, he doesn't know when he can start turning. He's trying to hold the plane straight for you to get your shots, and you got to communicate back and forth. I got the shots. I didn't get the shot. We can make another pass. I didn't find the target, whatever. So you're kind of calling the shots at this point, and working with the pilot to get the plane position for the shot, so that you're over the shot and you have your right spot, your right altitude, your right distance away from it.
And again, this is why I stress work together as a team so much, is back at, before the sortie, back at your briefing, make sure you all have talked through how you're going to handle things, that the plane's not, you know, just make sure you got a good rapport and keep communications free and open. Everybody's okay to talk. Do that kind of talking ahead of time, so when you're executing the sortie, then there's no problems and no questions. So again, I will always stress this: work together as a team with the aircrew, and work together to be successful.
All right, so you've got the picture. Okay, you're flying. You've either made your turn or you're just off the pattern, so you want to kind of hang out a little bit. You know, if the pilot can just circle that area, possibly. You want to be able to evaluate your photos before you leave the target. Everything should be done, I guess I'll say as quick as possible, but not rush. You want to be able to get out, get your pictures, get them back, get them processed, and get them to the customer in a timely manner. So everything you do should be kind of a thought pattern of, you know, if, say we do the extreme and we don't look at our pictures, we get all the way back to base and we have to go all the way out and shoot those pictures again. Well, there's a huge amount of time wasted. If you, you know, if you're not communicating good with the pilot and getting set up and getting off target good, again, it's not a lot of time, but it's just more time that's added up that all together, it's just, instead of a 1 hour mission, you're on a 2 hour mission or an hour and a half mission. Okay, the airborne photographer knows whether they got all the required shots, and the third crew member can keep up with the log. You must check and make sure, because you don't want to fly all the way back to mission base, like I just said. If you didn't look at your pictures, they're not focused, you got a plane part, you missed the target altogether. If he's still hanging in the area, you just, hey, we got to make another pass. I messed up. Okay, so let's be aware of all that. So what you're looking for, as we talked about in the beginning, your target is centered and frame filled. There's no blur, target's in pictures, no plane parts. Your geotag and your target card was captured. You can check all of that first. Well, you can check. Oh, I'm sorry. You can check all of them by just scanning through, reviewing the pictures in the camera, looking at the screen on the back, and then if you have the option of hitting that extra button to make sure they're GPS tagged.
Yeah.
If they're tagged, you should be able to verify that they're tagged somehow.
Yeah. And John, to that point, real quick, remember you're in the back of the aircraft or in the front seat, but you don't have your computer with you. So translation, when it comes to checking the photos, you don't have a big computer screen. So you have the view screen of the camera. So one, it's not as easy necessarily to look at that, but if you look at it closely and take your time looking at it, you can see the detail even in the view screen of the camera, especially if you're using these high-end digital cameras. The other thing I'll mention too is back when we talked about the cameras, and again, I'll keep my comments specifically to the Nikon because each of these other cameras is different. If I pull up the picture in the viewfinder and look at it, I can do all the things that are here except for one. I can't see in the viewfinder if it's been geotagged by just looking at the picture. But if you remember when we went through the camera, there are alternate view screens. And where we talked about histogram, I said I don't really care for that. One of the screens that John showed you is the Nikon has the ability to pull up a view screen that shows the GPS data. It is a separate screen. You simply do the rocket to get to it. So you can, even though the GPS data is encoded to the picture, you can, right there in the camera, hit the screen on that picture and verify that that GPS data is encoded. If not, because here's a real situation. depending upon the GPS unit that's used on your camera. Now, we recommend the Solar Meta Pros. And the reason for that is even inside the aircraft, even with the metal high wing above us, they tend to sink and hold their sync, but that's not to say they can't lose it. The earlier Solar Metas, depending on what aircraft again, some wouldn't even sink. So it is a real possibility. You could check the thing on the ground, and the GPS is all encoded to that. Most of them have an indicator that indicates satellite sync. But the acid test is to make sure it's in the picture. So it is possible you can take a picture and no GPS data is in there. But if you verify it, you can see what's going on and you can make compensations. Again, when we get into a couple of compensations, and we'll talk about them later, is remember, even if the camera doesn't, its onboard GPS doesn't do it, we've got recommendations in for you on what to do to still get GPS coordinates. And one of them is back on that target overfly pass. Is one of the recommendations is when you do the overfly and you're over the target, the pilot calls out over target, you take a picture of the aircraft's GPS display. So guess what? Even if your picture doesn't get done, you at least got the GPS data captured. Now later, we'll show all kinds of other ways to still get that handled. But the main thing is just be aware, there are, when we say verify the target, we're talking about all this data. And of course, the one that you can't just see right in front of your face is the GPS. You'll probably have to figure out how on your camera does it display that. And in the case of the Nikon, is when you have the picture, you hit the, I believe it's the left rocker switch on the back of the camera. It flips the screen, shows you the GPS data, and right back again. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure, John, everybody understood is the GPS is not quite as easy to look at, but they do need to check it.
Right. And like on the Nikon, when you flip that switch, you might get a different menu, your screen. I'm sorry, you'll get maybe a histogram, you'll get another picture. You may have to skip through 2 or 3 other screens to find the screen that has the GPS tag information on it.
Yeah, the key
and
thing
you
is,
don't have to verify every one of your pictures with GPS tag as you're going through. If you check the first one at each pass and the GPS tag, good chance you're going to probably get all 4 of them or however many pictures you took. And also, sometimes for I don't know what reason, the GPS won't tag a picture. I've gotten back and opened it up in the software, and I took 10 pictures, and number 6 didn't have any GPS information on it. So that may happen, and if that's the one you pick up, don't happen to look at it while you're flying, and you don't see any GPS information, don't freak out immediately. Check a picture before, after it, and make sure it's getting GPS. You should always have your backup GPS running, so you should be covered. But again, the preferred method is to stamp the picture as you're going. And if you take 10 pictures, you don't need to go through and look at every 10 and then make sure every 10 is also geotagged. You check the first one, they probably all the way are.
Yeah, and this is one of the other things to reiterate about those. Remember the four pieces of this process: prep, take, process, and delivery. This is where the prep step is good. The time to figure out how your camera works, how to get to a screen. Does your GPS unit have a sync light that you can just look at, a little green light? All that should be done ahead of time, back in the prep step. That's when you get to know your equipment, because you don't want to try and figure out in the aircraft, well, okay, I need to check my picture. Now, what do I need to do? How do I get to the screen? That all should be done in the prep step. So that's why I said there's 4 parts of this process. If you fail one of them, there's a good chance you're going to fail the rest of the steps all the way through. And this is part that's back up in the prep step. So if I haven't done these things, gotten familiar with my equipment, know how to look for the things, when I'm in the aircraft, I may not be able to figure it out. And I may end up leaving the target only to find out that information's not there. And where we have Band-Aids that we can fix it later, the enemy here is I can fix things usually, but it takes time. And the whole enemy of this whole thing is the longer I take the customer to get that to the customer's expectations are not getting real good with me. So I stress that prep step because it is a very valuable step. Know your equipment, know how to work with it, and then you'll be good in this piece.
Also, knowing how to use your camera. Another thing, if you look at that little LCD on the back of your camera, it's hard to tell if that picture is focused. Most cameras, any camera I've used lately, while you're looking at that picture, you can zoom in with a couple of button pushes. You can zoom in on the picture and you can see that, yeah, my target was focused and I got a good clear picture. But again, you need to be familiar with, if you want to do that, how to do it. You will need to be familiar with how to find the geotag information that it was tagged, how to review your pictures, what buttons to push, and all that needs to be like a second nature because you don't have unlimited time to go while they're flying around. Well, give me a minute. I'm trying to find this button and I'm trying to find that. So you want to be able to know how to do it and get through it and look at them, call them good shots, and then you can tell your pilot, we're ready for the next target. I got them. Yep.
And like I said, and even if you forget all the prep steps, even if you forget to bring your cue cards along, just remember the one thing that needs to be burned in your brain so it's permanent in your memory is never leave the target without checking the photos. And as long as you remember that, you can still catch things and fix things, but the rule that needs to be in, that it's not how to change things, how to go screens and all this stuff. It's never leave the target without checking your photos. All right, go ahead, John.
I mean, you might be a while, but there are some cameras you can put a memory card in. Not put a memory card in, and you can still take pictures and click and think you got pictures and all that. Yeah, and you shot the whole mission and to the extreme, you didn't even have a memory card in and you didn't know it because all the pictures clicked and the camera clicked and everything looked good. Well, you're not going to be able to review your pictures, but that's why you're reviewing your pictures in flight right after the thing. I mean, that's an extreme. I don't think anybody would go to that. But anyway, so do we want to break here for questions before we start the next section? Anybody got anything?
Mark, anything from the chat room we ought to bring up?
No, we're looking good.
All right, we will slide on. This next section, we're going to review some pictures and we will discuss, or I'll discuss with you, what went wrong, what possibly went wrong. Here we have a picture and it looks like they're taking the silos. Obviously the wing is in the picture and glare because they shot through the window. It may have been a pretty good picture, but without that. Okay, here you can see the strut in the bottom right where they just caught that. The angle and the glare in the picture is not really good. You don't have a really good, yeah, they were back far. They're probably trying to get the entire airstrip. But at that point, it just didn't work out for them. That wouldn't be a really good picture quality. Here, they're going for assumedly, now these pictures, I'm assuming what they're taking the picture of, so I don't know what the mission was, but let's assume they were taking the picture of the bridge. It's not really centered. They didn't catch it in there, and they got across the bottom. You can see the window, the bottom half of the window got caught in the picture. This is easy to do if you're flying and you hit a little turbulence, get a little bump. You had it set up, you were good, then you bumped, and you don't even need to look at the picture. If you feel a bump when you're taking a picture, yeah, let's go ahead and shoot another one, because you probably caught something in that picture or you didn't wind up with it being centered. You got a feeling that when you see that, when you feel it and you're taking the picture, because pretty much every time you hit a bump is when you're pushing the shutter. Okay, here, the little refinery picture. It's pretty centered, pretty good, but looks like it may be a little close. That 45, I'm not sure they're falling into that, unless maybe they're going for the tank field. And then obviously the strut in the left. Here we have the strut in the upper left, and I'll flip to the next picture and flip back. You can see how this is pretty hazy picture. I'm sorry, wrong way. No, I'm sorry, this is the example. Okay, hazy picture. And then in post-process, it's the same picture, run through Urban View, and it cleans up the haze. As you can see, there's the one with haze and without. So,
now the message here is, with all these shots that you've seen so far, you know, they're fixable, but they're fixable in post-processing. And now some things are unavoidable. The picture that John has up about haze, it may be a hazy day, and there's nothing you can do about this particular shot because of the sun angle and a few other things. So the message here is, we can fix these. In fact, every one of those, I could probably fix them in post. But here's the problem. In post, I'm having to handle picture by picture. And the enemy here is time. And if I start doing things picture by picture, it will take a lot of time and just delay my ability to deliver to the customer. So again, that's where we said is, for this one here, if you got a hazy day, one of your shots may be hazy, there's nothing we can do about that. We will fix it in post. But all those other shots, if you get them right and get the plane parts out the way and those type of things, get the thing centered, you're right the first time, and we don't have to do anything in post, and therefore time is not the enemy.
all right, here, good center, clearly out of focus. Oh, like I said, if you pull up your picture on the back, you should be able to see that. A quick zoom would definitely, obviously show that was out of focus. Too far away and too much sky. You want to shoot for a level horizon. You want the horizon, the sky, to be maybe about a third of your picture. This one is running close to half. Just way too far away and way too up. Here again, the tire in the lower left corner. If that shopping center part was the target, a little bit off center, missed it a little bit. But the biggest offender there would be the tire. Again, the wing, the strut, you're probably still coming out of the turn like it says, and didn't have a chance to level off before you started taking the pictures. Your overhead picture says here it's not centered. Yeah, I guess it's not. I don't know what they were taking a picture of, what the target was. If it was that first rail car, yeah, not bad. But again, it's kind of hard to say what it was, but appears to be not quite the center.
Yeah, John, this is another one. It depends on what the tasking is.
Right.
Because if the tasking is the fuel farm, you're off.
Right.
If the tasking is the railroad cars, all of them, then you're off. If it's the first lead car because it's leaking, may not be a problem. So again, but from a quality of a shot standpoint, it's clear, good color rendition, good depth of field, but depends on the target.
Right. And that's a straight down shot. That's a difficult shot to catch. So Now, we were talking about that before. You may have to make a couple of passes to get exactly what you need on an overhead shot. I mean, yeah, probably could bank a lot and all that, but yeah. And we're going to skip that part. Okay, so tasking.
Tell you what, John, let me
Yeah.
make one other comment. Just for everybody, if you don't think it can happen to you, all those photos that you saw, and had we done what's called the good bad quiz, where we have a lot more stuff we play with, none of those pictures are made ups. Those were all from real missions and were turned in. So if you don't think it happens, if you don't think you can take a picture and have those things happen, those are real pictures. Okay, they were not made up or staged for the presentation. So, okay, all right. So,
go ahead.
No, that was it. I was saying, go back to you.
Okay, I can testify to that. What Rick just said. I've been on a few missions, and I can guarantee you, I have a wing or a strut or a wheel in some pictures. It's almost unavoidable. That's why you always check your pictures and you take extra pictures, because you're going to get that bump, you're going to get that something or other, little tweak, and you're going to wind up not getting what you thought you got. Okay, so you're going to have a tasking sheet. I'll show you one in a second here. And it's going to, on that tasking sheet, is going to have your instructions for taking, processing, and delivery of the photos.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Let me throw in one of my legal disclaimers here.
Sure.
Folks, here's another area. Remember I told you at the beginning of this thing, we're giving you a recommended process. There's different ways of doing it. Just so you know, too, when it comes to tasking, we're going to show you probably what you would love to see. And if you have a tasking like this, then you have absolutely no questions about what you're going to see. Do I expect you, when you run your missions, when you get your missions, that it will have this kind of information? Probably the majority of the time, it ain't going to be anywhere near close. You may even not even get something written. So, but the purpose of doing this, though, even though you may not see this on a regular basis, is this will show you, though, the kind of information you should have. And if you get in a briefing with your air branch or your ground branch director, if they don't give you information that you need, hold on one second, I get two people bounced out on me. If they don't give you the information you think you need, this kind of heads you up on ask in the briefing, ask for this information. The worst they're going to tell you is they don't have the information. But so anyway, take this one as an example that you probably are not going to see in regular life, but take it more from the standpoint of look at the information you should be aware of. And if you don't see it, ask. All right, John, that's the end of the legal disclaimer.
All right. Back to the unofficial. So tasking sheet is going to have instructions for what you're doing, who wants it, how they want it delivered, and etc. There may be questions that you need to answer in addition to the photos. Was there water covering the street? Is the fence totally knocked down? Is the bridge falling down at any point? Trees blocking the highway, kind of stuff like that. So you need to be aware of those. If you don't have specifics that you need to ask the customer what they're asking for or your IC, and make sure before you head out that you know what the pictures they want, how they want them, all over the target, and what they're trying to capture at the target. What do they really want to see? Here's a tasking sheet. At the top, you'll have your numbers, your mission numbers, your call signs, sortie numbers. Then you'll run into what you want. This one here has photographed the marine and land systems. what you want to report back to mission base, a situation report, your questions to answer. If the storm over on the other side of the question, storm damage is visible. So you're going to report back to mission base when you fly over the target. No, I don't see any storm damage. If you want a FEMA package, if you want a ghost up package, as Rick mentioned earlier, that's our Louisiana customer.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
This one, since it's kind of more to make sure you have information. Now, the students, everybody got this, is in your student pack download. But I tell you what, let me share my screen real quick.
Okay.
And this one. Get this back over. I can see. Okay, this is just a blow up so everybody can see a little bit easier. But just the key things that are in here, because again, the reason I wanted to kind of liberate this is because later you're going to, this also ties in quite well with the photo processing. But on the tasking example, if you notice, there are things, and since it's blown up, it's easy to see now, but there should be some type of objective. You should know what's going on. And this one says, okay, do what I'm asking. And then notice it spells out, this particular example spells out, here's the target, da-da-da-da, here's what I should be doing, you know, okay, communicate, here's, I want the FEMA picture package. You'll understand what that is when we get to processing, but basically we're going to be delivering stuff to FEMA. And notice the instructions are do a FEMA package and upload to the database. FEMA packages, heads up, is the pictures clear with geotagging. Here's the example I mentioned about GOSEP for Louisiana, is do a GOSEP pack and put it on a memory stick. So this is really clear. The specifications, let me get to where, again, this is detailed out. As I mentioned, you'll never find one probably like this, but in addition, when we said FEMA pack, here's what the FEMA pack is. Also, if you notice, if there's anything you need later on to do this part, you're being given the information. Notice there's something called FEMA upload parameters. You'll see what those are, but if I don't have these 3 parameters, I'm gonna have to go ask somebody later on. So hence, notice the key thing is I'm gonna deliver what the customer is asking for, and it's all spelled out here. Usually you also have some standard things such as from the mission, so communications, some other notes that might be in here. So example, this photography notes about using mission number, cards. It lists out some equipment options. Again, this is really kind of, to me, like I said, this is an overkill, but if you put all the stuff in, there's no question that I better have that. I am spelling out that if I got to get the mission done, you can use some alternates. This also then includes some target verification. Again, remember, everybody, it doesn't do any good to take the pictures of the wrong bridge because you don't satisfy the mission. But in this particular example, coordinates are given, some plots are given to help you identify the target. But the reason I want to come here is be aware, in addition to asking, there may be some specific questions that need to be answered. And as I mentioned before, if my standard picture pack doesn't get at what a question is, I need to do some additional shots. So for example, this one says, if storm damage is visible, take additional photos of the damage. So what this translates to is, do the 4 cardinal shots that I was asked for. But example, if I see, you know, let's in that particular example, there's a parking lot. Let's say this parking lot got hit with a tornado and there's all kinds of cars turned over. I ought to take some additional pictures of that area to make sure that it answers this. Is there storm damage? Yeah, take a look at what it is. So this is probably, and you have this in your student pack, but this would probably be an ideal tasking. And understand, the chance of you seeing this in this full totality that you see here is probably slim. But it is a good guide to say, hey, if in your briefing, you get told you need to do FEMA pictures, well, and if they don't give you these parameters, you need to ask. Let's put it this way. You either ask now or you're going to ask later, but you need to ask. So, you know, and you can, another question would be is to your briefing officer, okay, I'm doing the 4 cardinal shots. Is there anything special I need to know about or that the customer might want? Okay. The other thing is, if you read what the customer is asking for, you're free to take your own initiative and add some shots in, even though they might not be asked for. Key thing is, get back to that comment I made earlier. Make sure your pictures tell the story that the customer is asking for. And if that means adding a few shots in, add some shots in. Okay.
Rick, can you scroll down to the bottom of that page?
Yep. This page here or second page?
No, right where you're at. Yeah, scroll down to that.
Who was asking that for?
John.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to show him a couple of things on the other half of the page.
Oh, down here?
Yeah.
All right, tell me where to go.
The second page, all the way down.
Oh, all the way down. Okay, I'm all the way down.
I'm not moving yet.
You talking about where the 2 pictures are?
Yeah. You got that?
Yeah, I thought I'm displaying. Oh, gee. I'm looking at the secondary machine. Looks like my screen's frozen.
We can skip past it. I'll go back.
Take it back. Yeah, take the control back. For some reason, I've frozen.
You have to stop. I can't do while you share. You got to unshare.
Well. Oh, there it is. Sorry, the unshare was hiding on my other screen.
All right, here we are.
Yeah, if you just reshare, you can pull it up, John. Or just go back to the slide.
No, that's wrong. Hold on a second. What the heck happened?
By the way, I would like to just extend some credit. That format you saw, Major Mark Warner was the author of that format. And
Me.
Next slide, John. There you go. That's the slide.
Okay. All right. So the other half of that picture, it's got some pretty handy things if you get a sheet like this. One is your GPS coordinates. Of course, that's pretty much needed to fly to the target. But with our pictures, with our tasking sheets like this, we get a Google picture, not really a picture like the top one shown, but we get a Google image. And that can really be very useful to finding your target. In that bottom where you can say, well, it's right there next by that water, and it's kind of after that fork in the road, and you can see that when you might not be able to pick the target out. Some of that stuff can be very useful in finding your target. And just because you got the GPS and the plane flies with the GPS, not always possible to pick out the target immediately. You might need a few cues from the ground, and there's something like that can really be helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize my screen had stopped. But the other thing too, I'll mention, if you're for yourself when you're getting briefed, if your briefing officer or your air branch director or your planning section chief says that's too hard to do, just be aware of both those shots. That's Google Maps.
Yeah.
And Google Maps, and of course the satellite view. And by just grabbing those, there's no question about where the target's at. Or, well, let's put it, there's no question, not where it's at, there's no question about what the target is when I get to where I'm going. And they're simple to do. It's just using Google and just doing a little screen clip and drop it in.
Okay, so before, during the sortie, you want to run through that prep and take cue card. You want to make sure you're all set up, your equipment's tested, you checked it, confident everything's working good, you got spare equipment as needed, you got your target cards filled out, ready to go. You're going to go get the shots, and you're going to verify the shots are good before leaving the target. After the sortie, make sure you have all your equipment before you leave the aircraft. One thing is the lens cap. That's always easy to forget. Take it off in the beginning. You might have it off the whole time. Don't forget the lens cap, other stuff. If you got your stuff all spread out over the back seat, gather all that stuff up. Make sure you have all your stuff. Your spare GPS, your backup GPS, whatever you had that. You probably had that out sitting somewhere, so it's got a good signal. So grab that up. You want to start processing and delivery activities as soon as possible. You remember, as Rick said, time, we want to be able to beat time, not taking too much time. You don't need to wait for the aircraft to be serviced if you got a way back to the building, or you can start processing at the FBO if you have your laptop. That was another thing in the beginning. We're talking about landing somewhere different. You want to make sure you have your laptop and all of your associated cables for it, because you may be processing the pictures at a different airport, and you can start and get that working. And then you're going to participate in the sortie debrief. So, a little review. We did the prep and the take today. Tomorrow, Rick will discuss processing and delivery. I think, okay. Okay, so let's run through this again, make sure we covered everything. So you got your toolkit, camera, GPS, target cards, blank SD cards, charged batteries, spare batteries. Your equipment's prepped, you reset and set your camera the way you want it. You cleared your GPS track log, you formatted your memory cards, you synced your camera to the GPS. You tested your camera and your GPS, everything looks good. Your photo, photo airframes and your photo task sheets. Okay, you went and executed your sortie, you got your photos, your target cards, your GPS panel, if you got that picture available. When you passed over the target, your target set, and you verified all your pictures. You verified you had good pictures. Now, no, you got to redo or go to the next target. And then when you completed all your missions, you got all good pictures, you're heading back. That's when you come back and either start to process your photos or hand them off to the processor. And let me stop there. Hold on a second. We'll go back to this. Okay, so we'll run through this real quick. Okay, as the cue card, pretty much everything I just hit on, but there's a couple things. Your camera, GPS, working good. You got your 2 empty cards, any necessary cables, like I said, laptops, anything if you might go to a different base and you have to recharge or start processing pictures. Battery packs, you want 2. And your batteries are fully charged before you leave on your camera and then your GPS. We're gonna start your GPS, clear your previous tracks. Like I was telling you, some models you might have to do that on a computer before you head out of the building. Ensure your GPS is on the right time zone. Set your camera back to factory settings. You want to format your cards. Verify and change the camera settings. Make sure your optical stabilization is on if you have that. Your autofocus is on. Exposure. Do you want to use sports scene or do you want to go with the shutter priority? Pick out which one you want. We discussed both of them. The ISO, film speed, how fast. Minimum 800, recommended 1,000. If you're using your shutter priority, then you want to set your shutter for 1,000. Photo quality, you want to set that to the highest of the camera will set, and of course, not raw. So after you set your camera settings to the default, you should have to run through these 6 items, and that should get you set up for most of the settings, for all your settings you'll need for this. There may be another, I don't know, I can't think of nothing you might have to pick. I'm sure there's something. But if you reset everything back to salt, everything's going to go back the way it was when it came out of the box. And then if you change the few things that you need, the ISO and your shutter priority or sports scene, you should be able to go capture some high quality. Oh, I'm sorry, change the quality. Should be able to go get some high quality, good, clear pictures. Your camera, if it's attached, make sure it's on, make sure the cable's attached properly, both to the camera and the GPS. Make sure it's got a signal and it's working, got a good signal and everything goes good. Before you head out, before you get on the plane, take a picture, make sure the geo data is encoded to the picture. Before you head out, make sure everything's good. Take your separate spare backup one and make sure the camera and GPS is set to it at any time. Now, if you have a GPS on the camera, like the next step is previous, you won't have to worry about fixing your camera time because that will override your camera time and GPS will stamp the camera time. So the 2 GPSs at this point should be the same. If you have a camera and you're only using a backup GPS device, which is now your main GPS device because you don't have one hooked to the camera, then that's when you have to make sure your camera and GPS are at the same time. And it's not a bad idea if you have a backup GPS device. I'm sorry, if you don't have one connected to the camera and you're using a handheld GPS device as your main device, it's not a bad idea to have your phone or something else as a backup to that one in case that one loses signal. Of course, you're not going to be able to check your pictures to see if you're getting GPS coded because it's not attached to the camera. So here, you just have to check your pictures, go to the GPS, make sure it's still logging, make sure you still see a track running or some indication that you're still collecting GPS and you haven't lost the signal because the GPS got put under something and it lost the signal with the satellite or it fell on the floor and through the airplane parts it couldn't get a signal. So if you're using a handheld as your main device, always make sure that you keep with the signal and the signal stays. And then the last 2 was just how to set the camera and GPS together to make sure they're synced up. And I believe that's it for me.
All right. Hey, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, let me make just a couple of comments on this after sortie, before sortie period. You saw John had a slide up that talked about, after the sortie, grab your equipment and that. Couple things. One, flight line may be right adjacent to wherever you're going to be doing your work, or then again, it could be across the Dawn airfield. Couple of things. When you finish your sortie, the comment was gather up your stuff and take it. That means everything. And here's why. Even if that aircraft is scheduled to fly another AP sortie, if you decide to leave stuff in it, 2 things can happen. One is when you go back in mission base, you may not, if you leave your stuff in the aircraft, you may not get tasked to that aircraft. Somebody else may get tasked to it. The other reason for bringing all the equipment in is member of the process. I told you the 4 parts of this process all are equally important. And the prep is one of those parts of the process. There's 2 key things in that prep thing. One is, the one foundation piece is you as the AP that's getting ready to go out on the thing, you don't wait till you're in the aircraft to check everything out. if the previous AP leaves stuff in the aircraft, you can't get your hands on it until you get back to the aircraft. So that's problem number one. So we want everything to come back in. And now, if you're if it's a one aircrew deal, different story. But I'm talking about a typical mission where we have multiple scenarios going on. So one, you want to bring it in because the next AP needs to check the prep. And the reason I say that is when you look at the cue card, and let me go ahead and bring that up real quick. On this prep cue card, let me make sure it is coming up. Yep, okay, it has come up. On this photo taking cue card, when it comes down to the preparation items, probably one of the most important things on this card is under the configure and camera time sync GPS setting, the very first line, reset the camera to factory settings. Okay. Now, if you are the only AP and you're the one that's using this camera all day long, this is not an issue. If you're at a multi-team scenario, actual training, remember I told you these sophisticated or these new high-end DSLRs have multitudes of options that can be programmed. Depending upon the skill of the person that's using the camera, or also what can happen is a person maybe is not so skilled, just accidentally starts hitting the wrong buttons in the wrong order. The camera could get put into an unusual configuration. It may still take pictures, but it may be doing something very funny with those pictures. And then you're trying to troubleshoot. So when it comes to people using, multiple people using the camera, one of the most important things is every time you get your paws on the camera, that very first thing to reset the camera back to factory settings is super important, because you have no way other than going through every menu and every option to see if a person before you changed the setting. And the key thing on that reset camera back to factory settings is that brings you back to the factory settings. No funny stuff has been done to the camera. And then you can lay your 6 items that are needed into that camera, and you're good to go. There's been a lot of times where I've had to help people where their pictures are shaded off, they're out of focus or whatever. There's a couple things, and it ends up being basically a camera setting was misdone. And there's a whole number of reasons that can happen. So I just want to kind of cover, let me go back. I'm going to kill the share real quick. I just want to kind of cover that 2 things when you're handing off. And again, because there's a number of things happening when you're handing off from one sortie to the next. One is you may be, handing off to another crew. You may be getting retasked. The other reason for making sure you bring everything in is if we're running photo processing teams, because again, we're having to get pictures. We got a lot of pictures to do. So instead of having an AP stay on the ground to process photos, we may hand them off to a processing team and have that AP get off on the next sortie. So the key reason for bringing everything in is in that scenario where you're going to hand off, the handoff has to be more than, oh, here's the SD card, here, processing team, go do the job. There needs to be communication. There needs to be a brief debrief with that to make sure the processing team knows the information they need. Otherwise, you take off on the next sortie, and the processing team does not have what they need, or they have questions. Bottom line, we can't deliver the product until we get you back. The other thing too is when we're in that scenario, we definitely do not want to hold you. If we need to get you back up as an AP on another sortie, and the process team doesn't have the information, I got 1 or 2 choices. I either need to hold the processing team from delivering product to the customer, or I need to tell the air branch to hold you off an air crew and keep you at mission base to provide the information the processing team needs. So when we're dealing with a photo processing team, we got some extra things that have to worry. this whole process that we went through, the prep and take, and of course, what's key here is why do we stress using target cards? Well, that's part of the key information flow if you're dealing with a processing team. Again, if you're just the only person, the AP, and you're going to do the whole thing, some of these things do not necessarily matter. That's assuming you're like me and you have brain cells that may never fail, of course. Sometimes I can't remember what door I came out of. But so some of the things we put in this thing may seem kind of laborious or, gee, why do I need to do it? There's a reason for it. You may not have a problem. You may be able to do it without a problem. But then again, the whole idea, though, is let's make sure we get it done the first time and get it right and get it to the customer.
Rick.
Yes.
Just a word. We had a mission. We've had more than one mission where all the targets were oil refineries. We have lots of oil refineries up and down the Mississippi River. They all look the same. So if you don't use a target card to separate them, when you get back to process them, even if you're the guy who took the picture, you're not going to know which one's which.
Yeah. Well, I said, if I get tasked on a sortie and it's a one target sortie, the chances of me remembering everything are pretty good. But I have not been on I haven't been on a sortie yet that has one target. Most of the time, it's got about 6. And like you said, if we're flying, as Mark mentioned, we're flying the river, there's processing plant at the processing plant, and they all got the same stacks. They all got the same tanks. So my chance of remembering exactly where did I break the picture. The other thing too is another reason for those target cards in the orientation cards is, remember, if we do the patterns exactly as recommended, then we always know 4 shots, great. First one's north, second one's north, east, north. Anyway, the sequence is going to be the same. If we shoot an out of sequence set, then those target cards are critical to be doing that. Okay, well, we are about 25 minutes soon. Let me just make a couple of general comments and we can hit and see if there's any other questions going on. And then basically we will target into tomorrow. And like I said, tomorrow will be basically the processing and delivery pieces. So we're going to pick up, you've got all the information in your student packs. You also had, if you want to pre-look at the pictures, in your student pack, there was also the class exercise sets. The one we will be focusing on, and you can, I don't know if I put the garbage can one in there for you, but I did that just so you can see how easy it is. We're going to be using what's called the North Shore set. And there's a bunch of issues and problems, and so we'll be working through those. Tomorrow will be less, there is still some groundings that have to go on, but tomorrow is going to be more a hands-on type walkthrough where we're basically going to go through step by step. I would like to say is in that you all have the software was in the package you can download, but I'm going to encourage you, do not try to play follow along with the software. This is the more complicated part of the process. If we're doing FEMA, we don't even need to worry about this. But if it's anything else, you know, we have to go through it. So anyway, that's going to be the heads up for tomorrow. The other thing I might mention too, real quick in general, is just about everything you saw in this. Well, okay, let me back up. One thing I dislike doing the online format is we cannot get into a lot of the hands-on demo. It's just very difficult here. That's why our in-person academy class, it's not 8 hours, it's actually 12. Because what we do to handle that problem is we execute this course exactly as you see it, but we're in person. So we do have a little more interaction as well as equipment. The key thing though is we tag on 4 hours of an actual sortie. We divide the class up into teams, into small teams, and we execute an actual AP sortie, but on the ground. Man, we don't have an aircraft, so we have to make do. But we basically execute the entire sortie front to back, from opening the camera case to the delivery of the product, by doing a walkthrough mission. So that actually lets us do the skill things, which lets you get more hands-on. We can coach into that. The other thing which makes it difficult in the online is we did do the camera locked into the Nikon, but again, the equipment out there can be so different. It all can take pictures. I mean, and there was one question that I thought I'd handle real quick. I mentioned this in the equipment, is that there are other things that you can use. I mean, if you're desperate, okay, of course this works for ground teams, but if you're desperate, I could literally run an AP mission using a cell phone. Okay, it is absolutely not ideal, absolutely not recommended, but if it's the choice of pictures versus no pictures, you know, I can do it. To that point, there are some applications that are recommended, and they're in the slides that you can put in there. So, because there was a question about GPS logging, the comment I'm heading to is, with both the backup GPS devices, or even the one that's on the camera, the backup GPS device, and backup GPS device means the handheld GPS ones, or I can do things like cell phone. The key thing is, whatever you use, you need to make sure that whatever that application device is, it will produce what's called a track log file. Specifically, it's referred to as a GPX file. Sometimes I get the acronym backwards. The reason you want to make sure that happens is, later I mentioned in processing, in post, if your pictures are not geotagged by the camera, we have the ability in post to geotag them. In fact, we have a number of abilities to do that. There's 5 ways we can tag them in post. The catch, though, is each one of the 5 things takes different amounts of time. And for example, the worst case, the 5th option, is I can manually type the lat-long coordinates into each picture. Okay, as you can see, that's going to take a lot of time. But one of the first options is, if you have a backup GPS device and it produces what's called a track log file, RoboGeo has the ability to go back to that timing synchronization. Is I can take RoboGeo, I can take my picture pack, I can take the GPX file that came in from any of those devices I mentioned, and immediately marry them. And so, and it's done by batch. It's not done picture at a time. It basically will nail every picture that needs it. So we'll cover that later on. But to answer that question earlier, yes, your backup devices, or even the cell phone, if you're using apps on the cell phone. That's why, if you go back to that slide I mentioned, there were 3 apps that were listed. Those 3 apps, both, first of all, they're cross-platform, so they work on Android or iPhone. And all 3 of those apps produce a GPX exportable file, which is what you got to have. Those apps also, especially the Soul, I can't remember, it's Soul something, and the GPS camera, they actually do just like the big camera. They let you take your cell phone, you use your cell phone to take the picture, and it encodes it in the metadata. So that's why those apps are out there. They're all free, available from the app stores. So they're nice things to kind of have on there. So I just wanted to get that question there. Okay, real quick, John, Mark, anything you want to add real quick? Otherwise, I'll open up the floor to questions.
Bring on the questions.
Okay. Everybody, why don't we go ahead and take a little time now, and if we haven't hit your questions, or any questions about heads up for tomorrow, squirters or anything else, feel free either unmute yourself or hit the space bar, but feel free to go ahead and ask them now, and we'll see. We'll try to handle those, but when we're done, we'll go ahead and call it quits for today.
Do the students need to do anything about entries to the squirter?
Oh, no, I covered that, or I covered that way early. The reason we asked you all to, we're using the Zoom meeting control system that we're using. That's the reason you all had to do the registration. Even though you were registered for the course, we had you register with Zoom. That's what it does. We're going to use that system, we handle the squirters. I expect to have all of your squirters updated by next Friday. The only catch is I have to watch out because certain people that may have already things posted, I don't want to disturb those. But the game plan is this session today and the session tomorrow. If you go look at the AP Squirter, all of the knowledge items you'll find they will be signed off because we're covering everything in the knowledge section. In the skill section, you're going to find there's one skill item that we will sign off, but the skill items are normally handled, as I mentioned in our academy class in the proficiency piece. Don't worry about that. You can handle those skill items when you do your 2 seat rides because you're doing the AP tasking, and that's where you'll be demonstrating those skills. So what you will end up with, no later than Friday next week, your squirters will be updated. All the items will be, all the knowledge will be taken care of. Skill items will have to be handled when you do your 2 seat rides to be qualified. The other part that you will have to handle that's on your squirter is your unit commander approvals for training. Again, I don't need those to get the squirters posted, but for qualification, you need to make sure your unit commander is taking care of his 2 sign-offs. Of course, you got to have the prerequisites. I can't do anything about those. The other thing that was down in the skill area that we do not cover in this course, even if it did, is the aircrew professionalism requirement. That is remember, that's an Aegis course that you need to take. And there's a couple other things, but again, those are things you do, you've done on your own. The ICS ones should already be taken care of. So anyway, in short, Friday of next week, you can go check your squirters. They will already be posted. I have access control to all of your squirters, so I will be able to take care of that for you. And by the way, to follow up, as I mentioned earlier, in case you didn't hear it, after that is done, you will also receive in the mail, you're going to receive the certificate from the Louisiana Wing Training Academy. It's the certificates we give out for the people that take our courses. Also attached to that certificate will be the printout log, which is the Zoom documentation log, which kind of acts like, okay, the signed Cap 11 for you. So you actually have proof. There's a proof in the log that you'll have. So you'll have both of those for your records, and you'll have your filled out squirter. Okay, any other questions there? Okay. All right, well, I basically thank you all for having the interest, and especially to our outer wing folks. Again, like I said, we're not trying to make you professional photographers, but our main thrust is we're trying to make sure that we give you the skills beyond just the task guides. The task guides have a lot, again, remember you have the task guides. We're not using them in the course, remember, because we're coming from a more practical application standpoint. But our intention is to give you enough information that you can be successful. We're trying to make sure we've identified the pitfalls for you. And the idea being is feel free, it's understood you modify, but if you follow this whole process that we're laying out here, the recommended process, the whole idea is to make sure you can deliver to the customer on time and the first time. So as I mentioned, tomorrow we will pick back up. It's 1300 Central Daylight Time is when we'll start back up. As today, I will open up the Zoom meeting for you all to connect up 30 minutes prior. So at 12:30, 1230, we will open it up. You can connect in. We'll start promptly at 1300. The session tomorrow, the process session, will be longer because we're going to go ahead and we'll cover 2 primary formats that are in the guide. One is the FEMA, because that's universal for everybody. So that will cover both what's needed in the FEMA pictures, and hope to God that you got it right in the camera, because then it just made your life easy. If not, we will show you the repair procedure. The other thing we will do with the FEMA is we will show you how to upload to the FEMA database. And those of you have heard the last tropical thing that came into the Gulf, there is a new FEMA mission for us, more based around ground teams. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but basically it's a parallel to our AP, but it's from a ground cell phone. Because again, in disaster situations and flood situations, ground teams are kind of useless because you can't get anywhere. But this new mission we have, which apparently we will get again, is basically a post-event documentation. It's primarily directed at the ground, but it will also include air. And so it's based some post, for example, flood. Thereafter, where were the flood lines? That also will use a program, but in the cell phone, and we will be doing direct upload. So that'll be something else that's going to be coming up. So anyway, but the processing will take through that. The reason the processing piece is going to take longer, as I mentioned, if something didn't go right, we will cover multiple methods to fix it. And of course, the most important one is if your GPS on the camera failed, okay, and you come back with a whole bunch of pictures, we will cover 5 different methods to get those pictures encoded. And that, in it, of course, any one of those 5 methods is still better than trying to send another aircraft back. So you'll find that we are going to take more time in the process piece. We will hit in the delivery piece. The main thing we're going to be focusing on is FEMA and what we have to do there. And there are a couple of problems that are out there that you just need to know about. So that will be the game plan for tomorrow. And we will wrap up. I apologize that we can't have everybody playing with the equipment or doing the ground sorties like we like to do, but we just threw. Yeah.
Let's see, Lieutenant Christie, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. She wanted to know if she could fly a training mission Monday, even though you may not have the SQTR filled out before Friday. And then somebody else asked about, could you repeat the SQTR details again, because they had missed it when you talked about that you were going to fill them out earlier.
Okay. To Christie's question, 2 things. One, I can make sure her thing is posted, but again, as long as she talks to her, who's ever her aircrew flight release officer, there should not be a problem. The key thing is that she needs to make sure those unit commander approvals are on her squirter. But if anybody needs something like a special case, if you will, safest thing to do so I don't forget, although I'll make a note, is if you will pop me an email, because you got my email address over all those things I was sending through, I can easily go out and make sure those squirters are handled soon. But again, the main thing on the squirters is once you have the unit commander approvals, then you can actually go through. Now, again, technically, no, because you shouldn't get in the aircraft unless you've been unless you know what needs to be done, because otherwise you're just doing a backseat joyride, and that doesn't serve anybody any purpose. But since you've gone through the material, we're covering all the material. If it's not on the squirter, shoot me a note. We'll make sure it's there for you. And the unit commander. The other, yeah, that's the main thing. Get your unit commander approvals, and we can flash the stuff in for you. But Monday ride, nope, that should not be a problem. Okay. Any others?
I just got to say thank you, sir. My squadron commander and our flight release officer are the rest of the mission crew for this flight. They just said they got money and they want to fly. And they said, we'll get you in the plane.
Okay. Key thing is, look at your equipment, just get familiar with equipment. Make sure your batteries are charged. And
what wing she's in that is authorized to fly a 3-person crew.
Yep. Unfortunately, COVID kind of causes a few problems. My suggestion would be to other wings, though, is make sure, just see what requirements, what accommodations be made. I've heard just in my contacts with some other wings, there are some accommodations that can be done, but you've got to ask for them, and it depends upon your particular wing.
Michigan is authorized to fly 3-person crews. I've flown recently as a observer.
Yeah, what it is, each of our wings, unfortunately, I don't understand why National didn't do this, but okay. The problem is when we hear things between the wings, each wing is handling its COVID recovery plan in different, it's phases just like everything else. And each wing, where Louisiana, for example, Louisiana wing, we're at phase 1. There are other wings that are in phase 3. So I can't speak to why they're doing that. But my suggestion would be I think we're all itching to get moving. I mean, Louisiana wing, we have not yet executed any of our full-scale ES trainings because, well, take it back. We were able to get our first full-scale SARX training, big multi. That's one of our multitasking wing-wide SARXs in February. But then we've been shut down. We've had things on the calendar, and we just have to keep canceling them and pushing them back. So it's causing around. So we're all itching to go. The question is let's try and do what we can. But as soon as we can, we want to get back moving on these things. The problem, of course, for the folks down here on the south is, June just passes. Here comes July, and our wonderful little, afternoon thunder shower storm season is coming. And so if a hurricane gets in the Gulf of Mexico, we know darn well what we're going to be doing. So we need to get our air crews our pilots need to keep their proficiency up. I can only do so much with aerial photographers. I can feed them picture packs and have them and exercise them doing processing, but I can't exercise them on doing, aerial shots out the aircraft. And another thing you can do too for your practice work, you don't necessarily have to be in an aircraft to take pictures for practice. Cars work. Just don't be the driver when you're trying to take the pictures. You don't get the same perspective and necessarily the same plane part problems and all that stuff. But again, just exercising through, making sure you remember how to do stuff, you can just take them from a car. But I will say with this process, the key problem or the key thing to where you usually will have memory retention problems is unfortunately in the processing, because I will say this, there are a number of steps you need to go through. It's very easy to, and that's where the cue cards really come in on the photo processing. It's very easy to forget to turn this switch on in this program, and then you wonder why stuff doesn't come out the other end properly. But going back to what I said, when it comes to aerophotography, you need to be more than qualified. Just being qualified, for my qualification, I do one hop ride in a 3-year period and I'm qualified. Sorry, that doesn't cut it on our missions. You need to be well beyond that, and you need to be proficient. And the only way to be proficient is to practice. So I would encourage you to boondog, hop in, plead, beg, whatever. Just get in flights, get in processing, and do what you can and stay proficient. Because when it comes, again, in Louisiana, we have our 2 friends that are on our doorstep, the National Guard and the Wildlife and Fisheries. And they would love to take the missions we get. Of course, at the same time, we're wanting to make sure we stay very in front with the state and very valuable to the state, because they are very nice and accommodate us with some funding to help our program go. So we're very conscious of that. And again, from real, Mark, you mentioned, about, we all have a whole bunch of real life situations. My passion, the reason you're hearing my passion and Mark's involvement and John's involvement in this is, everybody remembers Hurricane Harvey and the big, great mission that we did in Texas. With National, there was a lot of publicity of it. How many of you all heard that there was a Harvey mission for Louisiana Wing? Probably nobody. The reason is we executed on that mission. This is very early stage, but we actually executed a mission in Louisiana Wing for Harvey. If I remember right, we put 4 sorties up, if I think that's right. And the problem I have is, of the 4 sorties, we produced 0 deliverable product. And there was a whole number of reasons and a whole number of whys and where's fors, but bottom line is we did not deliver any product in that mission, and that is absolutely unacceptable.
Oh, and actually the same thing happened over in Texas. The first day of flying, taking photos in Texas, they shot lots of pictures, but none of them were usable because they weren't shot right. And all of that is fixable by knowing what you're supposed to do before you go out, being properly tasked, being properly briefed, being properly equipped, being proficient on your equipment, and then doing the job.
What was wrong with the pictures, Mark?
From the Harvey?
Yeah.
From Louisiana Harvey?
Yeah.
They were all out of focus and they were just blurry. It was terrible.
The things we covered, the basic things, you remember you say, how could this not happen? Happened. And it happened strictly from not necessarily following the steps that need to be done, and the other big thing was proficient. Mark can attest to a phone call he got, which should never happen, where basically, the aircrew team or the photo processor gives him a call and uses the words like, I haven't done this in 3 years, can you help? That shouldn't happen. So anyway, just so you know, these things do happen. The key to it, though, is paying attention to stuff and practicing. Just be proficient. Some of the changes we did in Louisiana Wing, the things that we're talking to you about is, we introduced and have kind of showed up the program because we do not want that happening. That's why you all have access to that Louisiana Wing programs, the program standards and documentation. That is, again, a refinement of just the pure old regs and squirter, but more to make sure that everybody in a wing knows this is what we want, this is what we expect. Because we cannot afford to have a sortie go out, spend money, come back in, and not deliver product to the customer, or deliver product that is useless to the customer. All that does is frustrate the customer and gives us a bad name, and we cannot tolerate that or have that. So anyway, and again, these messages, by the way, are the same for all the wings. Okay, yeah, these problems can occur anywhere, but the simple solution is be proficient. And if you are that, then we can deliver product, we can make the customers happy. So apologize, I started soapboxing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody, we are 1 minute past. So unless somebody else has something, I'm happy to hang on, but you all are welcome to go ahead and disconnect. We will reconvene tomorrow afternoon at 1300 CDT. I'll have it open 30 minutes ahead of time. And and one thing else too, real quick. I will go post, because again, I don't care what the name is on the screen. We're going to use the Zoom documentation log. So I will dump that for today. And when we start off, I'll probably shoot an email out with a copy of the attendance log showing who was there. If for some reason you were here today and you don't get a check on that, that means one or two things. Something went horribly wrong, or somebody shared a confirmation email. The registration part is universal to everybody. Those confirmations are what tie you to your cap ID. So if you happen to do a no-no and share your confirmation ID to somebody else, then there are now two of you and not somebody else. So at the beginning of the session, I'll hit that, and then I'll just remind everybody at the beginning. But we are using the Zoom documentation to document the attendance today. That's the reason we didn't worry about a roll call or anything. Okay, other than that, everybody, you're free to disconnect. Mark, John, hang on for a minute. I want to just kind of touch base with us. Thank you, and see you all tomorrow.
Christy, not sure your FRO can release himself.
No, sir. We have two in our squadron, and the one that normally does it is the one that's going flying with us tomorrow, and it will be the other one that releases the flight. We found out that the last time we flew that we couldn't do it ourselves.
Okay. Mark, John, if you got just a second, I will go ahead and dump the system and shove it out as we mentioned. Other than that, anything you all think we need to do before tomorrow?
It looked good. Sounded good. A lot of good information. I've taken a bunch of online classes, and you really covered it pretty well. I don't know what you